Good evening. Welcome to the third edition of Pat's Movie Mania. I'm Pat, your host, and today we'll be looking at a newer movie and an older movie, as we usually do, and then we're going to do a top 10, my top 10 list, I should say, from 1980 this year. We're up to 1980 already. So, let's get to it. For all you movie fans out there, the movie that I recently saw is from 2024. It's called Sam and Kate. So this is what happens when you get old, your memory starts going. So Sam and Kate is about older people played by Dustin Hoffman and Sissy Spacek, respectively, whose children are starting to fall in love and date, and naturally they start getting together too. The interesting twist about this movie is that Sissy Spacek's daughter is played by her real daughter, Schuyler Fisk, and Dustin Hoffman's son is played by his own real son, Jake Hoffman. And the resemblance between Schuyler Fisk and Sissy Spacek is amazing. Not so much with Dustin Hoffman and his son, but they play off each other very well. And it's just kind of a cute movie for older folks like myself, but it should appeal to all generations. So it's available on HBO right now, and really cute movie. I highly recommend it. You got two Oscar winners in there between Sissy Spacek and Dustin Hoffman, and just watching them on the screen and anything is usually a joy. So I would highly recommend it. It's also a good turn by Henry Thomas, who you might know as the boy from E.T., as Jake Hoffman's friend. And there's a very, very funny scene where he and Jake Hoffman and one of Sissy Spacek's older friends all get high, and it's really funny. But I won't give away the ending, but I believe you'll like this movie, especially if you're older, and highly recommend it. Now, my older movie for today is one of my all-time favorites. It's called Glengarry Glen Ross. It's from 1992, a David Mamet directed and written picture. And if you're familiar with David Mamet's work, you're really going to love it. No one quite writes dialogue like he does, except for maybe Quentin Tarantino and Aaron Sorkin. But outside of those two, no one comes close when it comes to a dialogue-driven movie like David Mamet can write. Glengarry Glen Ross, it's kind of a tongue twister. It's about five, let's just say, what shall we say, kind of unscrupulous real estate salesmen who sell land in Florida. They aren't illegal. They actually do sell land, but the way they go about it is, the very pushy sales people that you and I all both know. And the office is managed by Kevin Spacey. So listen to this cast. You got Kevin Spacey. Your salesmen are played by Ed Harris, Alan Arkin, Al Pacino, Jack Lemmon, and they're just amazing. You can't even count the Oscars among this whole cast, and they're just all really, really well. And there's a scene added where a young Alec Baldwin, plays a motivational speaker and comes in to tell them what's what. And I'm sure you've all seen it parodied on Saturday Night Live. It's become part of pop culture. Always be closing. As a matter of fact, I have this shirt on myself. I can stand up here and say A, always be B, C, closing. And this is what Alec Baldwin tells them. And that scene was added for the movie. It wasn't in the original play by David Mamet, and it's really a great scene. It kind of sets the tone for the whole picture. It's also Jonathan Pryce as someone that Al Pacino sells real estate to, and everybody's just amazed. Just watching all these fine actors in this dialogue-driven movie is just such a treat. And there's a really good scene with Jack Lemmon where he's trying to sell some real estate to Bruce Altman in his home, and and we've all been there, and it's just amazing. Kind of a downbeat ending, but that's the whole movie is kind of like that. But Al Pacino really shines in it, especially him and Jack Lemmon. But they're all great. Ed Harris, Alan Arkin, and Kevin Spacey especially. They were all younger. Of course, this was 40 years ago, something like that. 18 and 26 is 44. So never been good at math, but older movie. It seems like yesterday to me, and I kind of watch this movie like once a week just because it's so good, and it's a very relaxing kind of thing. Highly recommend Glengarry Glen Ross, available right now on Prime Video, among other places. If you haven't seen this movie and you like this kind of thing, rush out and rent it, or watch it on streaming, whatever you do. And yeah, rent it. I kind of dated myself a bit there, didn't I? But it's always available, and it's very good, and you'll really enjoy it. And if you're a big fan of David Mamet, you'll enjoy it even more. So that's our two movies for today. I'm sorry this one's a little shorter than normal, but what we're going to do now is go to our top 10 list for 1980. We started at 78 and did 79. Now we're up to 1980. Number 10 on my list from 1980 is a very little well-known, not a little-known movie called Folks, with two F's at the beginning. And it stars Roger Moore as a spy, but no, he's not James Bond. He's more like a SWAT team kind of guy in England, and an oil rig has been taken over by some terrorists, and it's his job to get it back. And she's very cute, very action-packed, good cast. You got Michael Parks in it, Anthony Perkins. They play the villains, and it's a good thing with about cats in it at the beginning and end. And as you know, I'm a big cat fan. If you are too, you'll love that part. But very good actioner with Roger Moore, and not as James Bond, but he does a really wonderful job in this. My number 9 movie from 1980, and this probably should have been ranked a little higher, because to me, it's one of the funniest comedies of all time, and that is, oh, there goes my alarm. That is Used Cars from 1980. This was actually, when I was living in Arizona at the time, they were filming this at a car lot down there. Of course, idiot that I am, I didn't go and look at what they were filming, but I just passed it every day and watched and looked at the set. Anyway, this is a really funny movie about used car salesmen with Kurt Russell, Jack Warden, Garrett Graham, Deborah Harmon. I could go on and on. A lot of people have smaller roles in it. This was kind of like this was directed by Robert Zemeckis, and you know his kind of comedy, and it's just very funny, very funny. A little raunchy at times, not really bad, but you know, for that era. There's some commercials they do, and they pirate the airwaves and take over and do their own commercials, and those are the funniest things, especially the second one. When you see that, you're going to be rolling on the floor. Kurt Russell's just hilarious in this movie, and Jack Warden actually plays 2 roles as brothers, but one good and one bad. Just one of the funniest movies of all time in my book. Number 9 on this list, like I said, should have been a little higher maybe, but my lists were made a while ago, so I update them from time to time. Anyway, that brings us to number 8. And this is Ordinary People, which won the Oscar that year for Best Picture. A lot of people rated it higher than I did. I liked it. There were some parts of it I didn't like, but it still made my top 10 lists. Yeah, I'm sure you all know the story. Mary Tyler Moore and Donald Sutherland, they're a high-end, high society couple, kind of high class, I would say. Not high class, but upper middle class. And they lose a son in a boating accident, and their other son, played by Timothy Hutton, who also won an Oscar for Best Supporting Actor, has a real hard time dealing with it. And he goes to see a psychiatrist, played very well by Judd Hirsch. And it's kind of, you know, him getting better, and how the family relates to both of them. And directed by Robert Redford, just a very outstanding movie. The acting is impeccable. I didn't have any problem with any of it. Elizabeth McGovern plays a good part, one of her first roles. And Dinah Manoff also, who we know from Grease, had a small part in it, but a crucial part in it. But Timothy Hutton is basically most of the movie, and one of his first roles, if not his first, and he did an excellent job, good enough to win an Oscar. And you know, you're taken away from Joe Pesci that year, but he was also very good. So you probably can't really complain about Timothy Hutton winning the Oscar. He did an excellent job. So Ordinary People, find it out there. If you haven't seen it, gotta see it. Number 7 and number 6 are also comedies, and this was a pretty good year for comedy when you look at it. Number 7 is Airplane, which is probably one of your classic comedies of all time. If you haven't seen it, I'm sure you have. It brought back the zany screwball kind of thing with Leslie Nielsen and Peter Graves and Robert Stack, and the leads were Julie Haggerty and Robert Hayes. Now, I read a book about the making of this movie, and the interesting thing I always found was that the part that Julie Haggerty played, the stewardess, who was actually the lead female in the movie, was originally given to Shelley Long. And at the last minute, the producers told the Zucker brothers, no, there's one more actress you got to look at. And they looked at Julie Haggerty, who could have been more perfect for that part. So they hired her instead. Of course, Shelley Long went on to be famous in her own right on Cheers and other things. But Julie Haggerty, you couldn't imagine somebody else playing that role in this movie. But for just constant laughs, it's hard to beat Airplane. You know, they had just a gag a minute, and, you know, some of them failed, but for 99% of them were right on spot. And you just can't stop laughing just all the way through the closing credits. You got to stay through the closing credits. And if you haven't seen Airplane yet, which I'm sure you have, but if you haven't, if you're a younger person, maybe you haven't, go out and see it. So that brings us to number 6, another comedy, which is very underrated, The Hollywood Knights. This is directed by Floyd Muttrick, starring Robert Wool, among others. This is a gang of car club enthusiasts back in the early 60s, who their whole life is their cars, and their favorite diner is being closed down, and of course they're going to try to do something about that. But very funny stuff here. Some of the stuff in there, probably don't know if they could do it today, but you'll understand what I mean when you see it. A lot of great music in it. Just very funny movie. Robert Wool, just a little too old to be playing a teenager, but he did a really good job in it. And Tony Danza has a small role, and Michelle Pfeiffer, in one of her very first roles, was Tony Danza's girlfriend. And the cast is outstanding in this. Highly recommend it. So, The Hollywood Knights, if you see it anywhere, check it out. Very funny movie. Which brings us to number 5. This is a movie that is not very funny, and that is The Shining, Stanley Kubrick's version of Stephen King's horror novel, The Shining, about with Jack Nicholson, of course, playing a caretaker for a hotel in Colorado in the winter, slowly going crazy, and really crazy. He's going, who plays a crazy person better than Jack Nicholson, right? You know, so now this wasn't real faithful to the book, but it was still a good movie in its own right. There were some parts that dragged, especially toward the end, but the leading up to that was so good that it's hard to complain. You know, Kubrick always puts his own stamp on movies, as he did with this one, and Jack Nicholson's performance is just impeccable. And Shelley Duvall, probably miscast, but you know what? She did a good job. She really did. And Scatman Crothers was in it. He played a crucial role. Just really one of those scary movies. Now, this has been remade for TV later on with Steven Weber and Rebecca De Mornay, and the sequel, Dr. Sleep, was out a few years ago. But Shining for 1980, definitive horror movie, and it kind of, you know, the second big Stephen King movie after Carrie, and really started getting him going in his career. So that brings us back to number 4, which we're going back to comedy now for Caddyshack, which, you know, probably the most quoted movie ever. You know, just, you know, all know about the story about, you know, golfers and, you know, wild, wacky kind of way. Rodney Dangerfield, Ted Knight, Michael O'Keefe. Just, Chevy Chase was just one of his better roles. Just hilarious. Every time he's on the screen, you can't help but laugh. And they made a sequel to this. Wasn't quite as good, but Caddyshack in 1980 was a good year for comedy. A lot of the critics dumped on it because of its crass humor, but to me, when you watch a comedy, if it makes you laugh, it did its job, you know. And if you're looking for high-end, highbrow comedy, this isn't it, but it's just very funny. Very, very funny. One of Rodney Dangerfield's best roles, and can't miss it. You all know the story, you know, Bill Murray and Chevy Chase, their scenes together were just hilarious. I'm not going to go quote them like everybody else does, but you'll know them when you see them. So that brings us to number 3. This is The Long Riders, one of Walter Hill's early movies. This is about Jesse James and his gang. And what struck me most about this was the authenticity of it. It actually takes you back to that 1870 or whenever it was, and puts you right in there. Everything about it was authentic. The costumes, the props, just a wonderful job. Now the James brothers, and the twist in this movie, of course, is that the brothers are all played by real brothers. Jesse James and his brother are played by Stacy and James Keach. The younger brothers are played by David Carradine, Keith Carradine, and Robert Carradine. And the Miller brothers are played by Randy Quaid and Dennis Quaid. And if you want to go even further, the Ford brothers are played by Christopher and Nicholas Guest. So it had that going for it. You know, that also helped with the authenticity. But just a very straightforward telling of what happened. How much of it is true, we'll never know. But it was just really, really good. Nobody can direct this kind of movie like Walter Hill could. And he did a wonderful job in it. And James Keach as Jesse James was great. They were all good, but you'll love David Carradine and Pamela Reed who played Belle Starr. They were just great. Even James Remar had a small part who you see in many Walter Hill movies. He played the villain in 48 Hours, and he had a big part in The Warriors also, which was one of our top 10 movies from 1979. So we're up to number 2, and this is another one that most of you probably aren't going to know. It's called Breaker Moran. It's an Australian movie about an incident that happened in the Boer War in the early 1900s, where 2 Australian officers were convicted of killing Boer prisoners. And they were just kind of used as scapegoats to appease the Germans and the Boers themselves and try to get the war ended. But, you know, what they did, of course, really wasn't bad. I mean, they were at war. They had to kill people. That's how it was. And this is a great courtroom drama. It's about their trial, their court-martial, and the wonderful lawyer that they had, played by Jack Thompson in one of his early roles. And he just was so good in it and basically proved them innocent, but I won't give away what happens at the end. All I can tell you is the ending scene is one of the most harrowing, emotional scenes you'll ever see. And it stars Edward Woodward, Brian Brown, all your good Australian actors are in it. Jack Thompson, Lewis Fitzgerald. Very emotional movie, very realistic movie. Breaker Moran, check it out. So that's going to bring us all the way to number 1 on my list for 1980, what some people consider one of the greatest movies of the 80s, and that, of course, is Raging Bull, Martin Scorsese's masterpiece about the boxer Jake LaMotta, played by Robert De Niro, who won an Oscar for his performance in it. Filmed in black and white, which you don't even notice because the movie is so good. Joe Pesci plays Robert De Niro's brother, and how he didn't win the Oscar is just beyond me, but he was redeemed years later in Goodfellas, another Scorsese and De Niro pairing, but Joe Pesci was so good as Robert De Niro's brother in this that it's just amazing that he didn't win the Oscar. But to each their own. You know, Timothy Hutton was good, can't deny that, but I would have given it to Joe Pesci. And Kathy Moriarty in her film debut, if I'm not mistaken, played Robert De Niro's wife. And of course, the story isn't just about boxing. It's about his slow descent into madness as he gets more paranoid about his friends as he gets more successful as a boxer. And now, to me, I'm not a big fan of boxing movies, but again, this is just a top tier movie. Martin Scorsese at his best, Robert De Niro at his best, and you can't miss it. One of the better films of all time. Now, at the time, some of the critics didn't like it, but then 10 years later, when all your best movies of the 80s critics came out, what was number 1? Raging Bull. And didn't even win the Oscar. But I have it as number 1 for my top 10 for 1980. And again, one of the better movies of all time. Really. Check it out. You won't be disappointed. So, that's it for this week. We shall see you again next week. I hope you enjoyed this. I know I did. So, get out and watch your movies and enjoy them like I do, and have a good week, and we'll see you again soon. Bye now.